Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. We're very happy to welcome you to this session. Our session today is focused on the digital right impact of telecom services in Lebanon. It's a project that SMEX has been undergoing for 1.5 years now. The goal of this research and this project is to look at how the bad quality and the very expensive internet services in Lebanon had impact on the digital right and the right to access telecommunication services in Lebanon, mainly for residents, but also with a main focus on specific groups, such as domestic workers, refugees, people with limited income, and students. So basically today, we are presenting to you a very interesting panel in which we have Maguy, who has been working on the research. And we are also having Julia, she is a co-founder of the Domestic Workers Alliance in Lebanon, and she will be sharing with us her experience using telecommunication services in Lebanon. I will be also covering some legal aspect of consumer protection rights that have been violated in Lebanon, and we're gonna have like some focus on the technical aspect of this session. So I'm gonna allow you to have like some questions at the end of the session, so feel free to send us your questions in the chat. I will be sharing the screen so you will be able to see the presentation. And we're gonna start off welcoming our two speakers. So Maguy Arnous is the researcher who's been working with us on this paper. And we also have Julia, who's the representative of the Domestic Worker Alliance in Lebanon. I will be at some point asking the questions, but I will let Maguy start off by giving us a brief introduction and an overview of the telecom sector in Lebanon, and then we'll let her dive in a little bit more into details to talk about the challenges. Okay, so Maguy, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Najah, for the introduction, and thank you, SMEX and Bread and Net, for organizing the event and these informative sessions. And thank you also to my fellow panelist, Julia. I'm very happy to be here to discuss our research report on the telecom sector in Lebanon. If you allow me to take a step back and walk you through kind of the history of the telecom sector in Lebanon and what we tried to do in this project. We certainly did not reinvent the wheel, but it was most definitely a behemoth effort to revisit a very complicated history of the sector and bring in key experts, whether policymakers, legal, technical, and civil society experts, to contextualize that history and understand why we are where we are today. And also speak to disadvantaged groups about their experiences on a daily basis with the telecom sector and the services provided by it. So while unpacking that history and also answering Najah's question about the challenges at the same time, I will be zooming in on these challenges or the accumulated mistakes that transformed the telecom sector, dubbed as Lebanon's oil. And maybe I should virtually underline that 2 or 3 times, something to think about as to why it was dubbed this way. So going from a sector that generates $1.2 billion as per the 2016 numbers to the state's treasury to quasi-totally unraveling post the 2019 economic crisis in Lebanon. So again, back to the history, in the 1950s, the uptake of the telecom technology in Lebanon was swift, with Lebanon's infrastructure being even more developed than major Western cities at that time. And on the legal side, there was also the adoption of Law 127, which aimed at regulating the sector, and especially when Lebanon sort of became a hub for international telecom companies to come and invest in it. As we all know, Lebanon's golden age did not last, and economic ascent was brutally interrupted by the civil war, which spanned over 15 years until 1990. And the telecom sector was evidently affected with the withdrawal of investments from global companies to the destruction of all of the infrastructure and the national grid that upheld the services at the time. And I believe the damages from the civil war were assessed at over $500 million. So this immediately translates into a significant challenge for the post-war rehabilitation period, which started in the early 1990s. And there were valid questions raised at that time. First, how to reconstruct the sector, how to keep up with new technologies that came up, came to be in the 80s, with Lebanon being stunted in the mid-1970s period. And most importantly, where do we get the money from? I think that's the main question. That period witnessed a very aggressive liberal economic model for rehabilitation, and this is true for all sectors. But for the telecom sector specifically, the government had started to take loans to rebuild the destroyed infrastructure, invite global telecom companies to invest and provide their technical expertise to revamp the sector. And in 1994, the government entered into two build, operate, transfer, BOT contracts with France Telecom and Soanirina of Finland. And for those who don't know, France Telecom was 33% owned by the Mikati Group, and Soanirina was 86% owned by the Dalloul Group. And these are prominent Lebanese business families and political families that had also close ties to the government at the time. So the BOT contracts were set to design, finance, and construct the mobile network infrastructure, then operate and maintain the networks for 10 to 12 years before transferring the networks back to the Lebanese state, who will become the sole owner and operator of the telecom sector, and subsequently the sole revenue collector after that period. And this is when we witnessed the creation of two mobile network operators, Celis, which is now Alpha, and Libancel, currently Touch. And I'm not sure how much the audience is well versed with the internal political atmosphere in the country in the 1990s, but one relevant political debate at that time was privatization, al-khaskhasa. It was all over the news and really polarized the country into two camps, either pro or against privatization. And this was a significant, again, challenge. We had a very lucrative sector that can generate significant revenues for the Lebanese state, but we also had, we started to accumulate and default on external debt. And public debt at that time had increased, reaching over 120% of GDP in year 2000. And we must really keep in mind that Lebanon does not exist in a bubble, as it has always been an open arena to external political interference, and most crucially, with internal players, internal politicians, influential politicians who have not only strong ties with external powers, but personal economic benefits as well with external companies that were directly involved in the management of the telecom sector. This practice of conflating between personal and national interest had led, therefore, to had led the Lebanese state to prematurely terminate the BOT contracts with France Telecom and Soanirina of Finland, with, again, the thinking of privatizing the entire sector at a later point. And that had cost the state $350 million in penalties for the termination of these contracts. So in our research report, we delineate the second period in the history of the telecom sector that spans until 2005, so 1990, 2005. And this is, again, this is not just random. In the mid-2000s, a lot of factors directly impacting the telecom sector happened in parallel. So the initial privatization experiment of the 1990s had essentially failed. The state was unable to fully operate the telecom sector and therefore was contracting new companies to do so. And instead of France Telecom and Sonera, we had Datacom, Orescom, Zain Group, etc., etc. The Israeli war on Lebanon in 2006, which again destroyed a lot of our infrastructure. And on the other, like more external factors, there was a seismic shift in the world of telecommunication with the introduction of smartphones and the iPhones and the sort. And if that wasn't enough up until, let's say, 2007, only half a decade later, so 5 years later, in the early 2010s, our entire interaction and usage of telecom services changed. So instead of making calls over a cellular network or sending SMSs or MMSs, if anyone still remembered those, we started consuming megabytes, interacting with social media platforms, making calls over the internet on new platforms such as WhatsApp and Facebook. So there was a shift from what we call in the report for telecom companies from selling minutes to selling megabytes. And Lebanon essentially went from selling, actually from having one of the most expensive call minutes in the region to having the most expensive bundles for data. And just to note the last factor in that time period, the influx of Syrian refugees starting 2011, which essentially meant more users connecting to our telecom grids. So all of these rapid developments were, however, met with subpar efforts and investments to modernize the sector. The telecom network's infrastructure remained underdeveloped, leading to suboptimal mobile and data services, despite being the most expensive in the region. And just to give you an example, to illustrate this point here, subscribers in Lebanon were paying an average of $65 per month compared to $40 bill in Saudi Arabia and even less so in European economies. So during that period, 2010, 2019, the state monopoly of the sector halted genuine progress and long-term investment to reinforce the services and make them sustainable. Political exploitation of the sector prioritized political interests, election calculations over delivery of adequate services, while profit was being generated from outrageous pricing of mobile and internet services. And there were also staffing for political goals, using public goods to sponsor political events masqueraded as festivals or sports tournaments, and running incessant advertisement campaigns in the absence of actual competition. We only had these two companies, Alpha and Touch. So this all diverted attention from investments in what the sector really needed, such as infrastructure, diversification of energy sources for sustainability of services, and the newer technologies to keep pace with the global development of the sector. So not to paint a very bleak picture, but in a way it is, and we are living in it today, the 2010s period could have saved the telecom sector in Lebanon. There were huge investments made in the country and plans for making Lebanon a digital hub for the region by 2020. But the continued malpractice and the circumvention of the law had only led us to a very fragile sector. Lebanon is not lacking in capabilities, and people who would have advanced the sector with up-to-date innovations and technological advancement, but the untapped potential lies in familiar practices of nepotism, crony capitalism, and Lebanese famous wasta. And for the first time in the history of modern Lebanon, this wasta and these malpractices are not just hearsay or this is how the Lebanese do it, the Lebanese way, which goes against any form of accountability. These malpractices have been well documented in the Court of Audit's extensive report detailing how successive governments and telecom ministries have squandered $6 billion between 2010 and 2020. So what we have done so far in these continuous malpractices and corruption instances up until the turbulent events that started in late 2019, and very importantly, to also take a step and consider Lebanon's political deadlock since the election in 2018, followed by the October 17 protest, followed by the 2022 elections, which only helped in increasing the political infighting and the polarization in the country. The current parliament, for instance, is unable to proceed with electing a president, nor holding anyone accountable for one of the worst economic and financial crises to ever exist. Our government is a caretaker government, and we have failed to form a new one. So zooming in on a particular entity or official really fails to consider the complexity of the Lebanese political context. The financial crisis did not occur or did not start in 2019, but it is a legacy of malpractice, corruption, crony capitalism, and lack of reform and accountability that has been synonymous to the Lebanese political life in the past 30 years. And this is why the telecom sector could not withhold the economic crisis that hit the country in 2019. Even in the early days and months of the crisis, we were already talking about complete blackouts and interruption of the mobile and internet services. And this actually did happen in many rural areas, even major cities. And finally, like as with the energy sector in Lebanon, which we know so well, or the water sector, for the telecom sector as well, citizens were forced to pay more, subscribe to different providers at the same time to stay connected and maintain a very vital service in this day and age. And this was not even rock bottom. Again, post 2020, there was the dollarizing of the service, which is again a step that goes against the benefit of the Lebanese citizens and those living in Lebanon. And instead of active reform and measures that can help disadvantaged communities to still afford telecom services, the Lebanese government decided to shut down the 2G network, jeopardizing the access for hundreds of thousands of people to the internet unless they could afford newer phones that can withstand the 3G networks. And this is something SMEX has extensively worked on and talked about. And I think this is a good segue to speak about the impact on marginalized communities. And I'll be giving the floor to Julia to speak about her experience and the experience of domestic workers in Lebanon. But just to unpack this point further, we also heard from a number of disadvantaged groups, be it students, taxi, Uber, totter drivers, refugees, and inhabitants of informal settlements in the suburbs of Beirut. And the overwhelming majority agreed that there's a lack of access to a reliable and uninterrupted service outside of Beirut. So areas, even greater Beirut area. So basically anywhere outside of central Beirut. And for students, that meant a negative impact on their education, especially during the COVID-19 lockdowns and their career prospects. And it is all tied together. We cannot separate the devaluation of the currency, the lack of stable electricity inputs from all of this. Seeking salaries in dollars, in USD, fresh dollars, meant young people especially were seeking remote jobs, which necessitates good internet connection at the very least. So we heard from families who had to subscribe to more than one internet provider. That is on top of subscribing to the area's generator and putting on solar panels. So how many degrees of backup plans do we need that this was not sustainable? And again, this is for families and students who were able to afford these backup plans, but entire families, portion of students, and especially women, and this is not often talked about, the impact on women. Women had to let go of being able to access a basic service in the 2020s because it was becoming more and more expensive, and they had to prioritize other basic needs. So this entire ecosystem of services was not just severely expensive for the average Lebanese and inhabitant of Lebanon or anyone on the Lebanese grounds, but it was expensive and unreliable service. So I think I'll stop there and give the floor back to you, Najah, and maybe Julia can share her perspective and experience on this issue.
Thank you, Maggie. Okay, so Maggie did give us a brief overview of what we did in the research and of how people in Lebanon are living in a very unreliable network connection along with a very expensive service. So today we have with us Maggie, and we also have with us Julia. Julia, we're very interested and very thrilled to have you here with us. You're representing the Alliance of Domestic Workers, and we are very interested to hear from you your feedback. Can you please share with us your experience using telecommunication services in Lebanon? I know you've been here in Lebanon for over 20 years now, so you can tell us how is the quality of the service and the bad prices having an impact on you? As a domestic worker, but also as a representative of domestic workers in Lebanon. And can you let us know if you noticed any change in this service between 2019 and 2022?
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, Julia. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Sorry. Oui, je suis en téléphone.
Okay.
Sorry, just 2 minutes. Hello again. Sorry for the interruption. Yes, I'm here. I'm Julia Soanirina. I'm co-foundatress of Alliance of Migrant Domestic Workers. And I was here since 1996. When I come here before, really for telecommunication is very difficult because only we have landline, so only we can use this landline. But after that, the landline they put like before there is Kalam or Telecart like this, so it's developing that until in the smartphone come and the internet megabyte is come. So that's time, and now until now, starts now, the telecommunication is useful only because now we have that smartphone. So this is we can connect with our family, with our friends, with the migrant domestic worker. And because migrant domestic worker is our work is closed door, so we are not isolated with that smartphone and with the megabyte and in the internet with it. And in our organization also, we use too much that the telephone and the telecommunication, like the group WhatsApp, to connecting with all people each other. We share in that, and also as we are organization, also we can do we can join the international conference meeting by Zoom in this time. But before, no, because when I come here, it's really very, very difficult for me, for us, because it's just a landline. after we go to the international call, but now everybody have the smartphone, and now we just connected people, as we said now. And the changes, really, the changes is coming very, very expensive. And too much people cannot avoid to pay now the internet fee, to charge them telephone. So it's very, very impact for us because we cannot connect it with our family, and because we are abroad, we cannot connect it with our family. And sometimes also there is the réseau is not good. It's poor connection. We cannot join. We cannot go in good connection in internet, and we cannot reach some people. There is some place we don't have any réseau. And also there is people like the freelancer people. If the employer call them, they cannot answer the phone because they don't have internet fee. Sometimes also they use to change number because the one is they don't charge is burned, and then you have to change again another. And now in this time, even to buy line is very, very expensive. And in case if you are not legal, you don't have paper, they will ask you a passport, they will ask you too much things, too much document before you get in your line. So it's coming difficult as a people outside, and then they don't have regular paper. Also, because of the expensive things, it's people cannot charge phone every time. So it's coming down less than before. The connecting with the family, the connection with the fellow migrant domestic worker, the connection with others, the connection with the people.
So you told us that to some point, this had a very direct impact for domestic worker on your ability to work in Lebanon, to communicate with your client. And you're also mentioning that you're having difficulty staying connected. So today you need to pick how much money you spend on connections. And due to the expensive prices, you cannot afford being connected all the time.
Yes.
Okay, so was it the case before 2019, or it's only after the economic crisis and the new prices adopted in 2022?
After the economic crisis, and plus the COVID, plus the blast, after all these three crises, everything coming expensive. So after this, the people reduce to using phone, to using the mega, to using the internet, because it's very, very expensive.
Okay, and like, for example, what would you consider very important to have if we're gonna have any reforms for the telecommunication services in Lebanon? As the domestic worker, what would you need? Like, what would be ideal for you if we are trying to progress?
Yes, we need especially we need the price to reduce if it can, and we need also the connection will be good connection, and we can have it the connection good, and in price, good price.
Okay, you would need like affordable prices?
For the place, yes. And if in case if we cannot charge in 1 month, why don't give a grace for a month or for a day, or there is a card to buy in affordable price for 3 or 6 months. Like this, we don't go to pay every month the money for charging the day, and to avoid also to burn our card, our number, and then we're gonna buy again another number. It's very expensive and require too much document. That is if it can be. And in case also, if for example, if I use too much internet and I don't finish it, why I cannot share it with another one or send it another people cannot have internet. I will go like transfer credit, but transfer internet megabit.
Yes, like we can understand that most of the cases you will need like having more validity of the time of your
more
SIM
yes.
card. And
Yes,
also
yes.
the affordable prices, more friendly packages that are inclusive, having a better quality. I mean, these are very valid requests. One last question I might be interested in asking, it's related to the day-to-day usage of the services. And we would like to know if you had like any issue with your telecommunication services and like if you felt like you tried to contact the operators and nothing happened. Have you experienced like any violation of your rights as a consumer of telecommunication services?
One day only I have that during the COVID because when I put my megabytes, it's not working. They don't have internet, but I just add it in my telephone. So I called, I don't remember what number I called. They send me to another operator again send another operator, and at least I change 3-4 operator as I am speaking also French in origin, but I'm speaking English also. But I stay in speaking French if I want to explain very well my situation. So I stay in speaking French. They change me again another operator. I think until 4 operator. And until they understand me and they get me, after they said it will back after 24 hours. That is my experience I have.
Okay. But like I think we had like a big broad overview of the challenges you're facing as a domestic worker and as a representative of the domestic workers working in Lebanon. I'm gonna take the opportunity here to talk a little bit about the legal analysis and the consumer right violation for the telecom service. Unfortunately, we do have in Lebanon regulations that are good, that are accurate, that respect consumers' rights, and unfortunately, these laws are most of the time not being applied, not being respected as they should be. One interesting point to mention is that what we consider a service here in this research, technically having access to telecommunication should be treated as basic public utility. And it is a human right. Today we talk about human rights online, and the digital sphere has become like a very major component of human rights, more and more, even after the crisis, the COVID crisis and the economic crisis in Lebanon. Not having access to internet means that the average person will lose access to a lot of rights, like including their ability to access medical support, or their ability to communicate with the world, or their ability to find a job, like the students who shared with us their experience, or the ability of domestic workers to keep in touch with their clients and to be able to work. And today, sadly, we are talking about a service that has become very expensive, and people were forced to change their behavior, to say the least, to consume internet less than what they used to consume before. Maybe they had to give up some things to afford the services. And this is really a big violation of human rights and digital rights and right to access. Unfortunately, we're not treating the telecommunication service and right to access telecommunication service in Lebanon as a public utility. We are treating it as a normal service. People who have the luxury to afford it will access it, and people who don't really have this luxury will be left out, and they will be even more marginalized than what they really are. This is very important for us to highlight Because when we were doing this research, we noticed that a list of violation passed by along the way. We had a very detailed paper. Actually, it was a very detailed report, sorry, from the Audit Bureau. And for people who are not very familiar with the term, the Audit Bureau is technically the public court that comes and audit public government or public or government organization in Lebanon. And they have the right to go in and make an investigation on how the funds were collected and where the money went. And they had a very extensive investigation on the telecom sector, which led to 3 different reports. And it led also to technically the investigation and the naming of 6 ministers of telecommunication between 2010 and 2022 that were responsible for all the corruption that happened in the telecommunication sector. And we can believe that they directly and indirectly led to this crisis where we have very bad quality of a service and a very expensive price for the service we're having. Moreover, I would like to highlight that unfortunately the law do provide more safeguard and more protections when it comes to the governance of this sector. And technically we had an organ, which is the TRA, and it's the authority for the telecommunication services in Lebanon. This is a private, this is a public, and it's a public entity, but this public entity is independent, and it has a big role in supervising how the telecommunication sector is being managed. And they do have the right to technically object any increase in the prices of telecommunication services in Lebanon, which is a great safeguard for all users. And unfortunately, the law was adopted in 2002, but technically the TRA did not really function, or it had a very limited role, which led us to not really be able to benefit from the application of the law. Another very important point to talk about here is the recent increase of prices in 2022, which was at some point divided into 2 sections. Like from one side of the conversation, the prices themselves were changed, and they were in mirroring the black market or the real value of the USD in Lebanon, which led a lot of people to not be able to afford the services anymore. But on the same point, at the same time, another operation was agreed on with the minister and the operator companies, and it led people to lose 94% of their current balances that were valid at the time. This operation, it was decided to unify the balances of people, and it was at the beginning sold as a way to combat people that were collecting cards to resell them later on in a market that is practically a monopoly. But in fact, it wasn't the case, and it led people to lose their balances, which is a clear violation of many regulations, including the consumer rights. And I would also like to highlight finally one last point that is related to some practices that we have been documenting through our research, one of which was the fact that telecommunication companies abused users' rights sometimes by subscribing them to unwanted and unsolicited services. And if these people decided to opt out from these services, they would either have to make a paid call, or they would have to pay certain charges to opt out from these services. And most of the time, the services mentioned are paid services. So this is leading people to lose their money, technically, even for services that they did not request. And unfortunately, whenever people try to follow up with the companies and request reimbursement, most of the companies say you agree to our terms and conditions, and we deflect, and they do not really make the compensation. So to make it a little bit simpler today, we have seen many layers of violation towards consumers, and we have noticed that following up on these things and bringing more awareness in terms of following up on what our rights are makes it a little bit complex to step out of the reality of the monopoly of two companies that are today state-owned, and the fact that, sadly, the current people in Lebanon do not have a choice because there is no third option. And this is why we as SMEX were very interested into working on this project and continuing this work to advocate for a better quality and fair prices to make telecommunication services accessible for everyone in Lebanon, and to not make it just a service that is a luxury and so little people can afford it. So I technically wrapped up a little bit in the end, the conclusion of what we mentioned. I don't want to overstep the time that we've been given today. Therefore, I will open the floor for any question from the participants and from our speakers. If anyone would like to ask any question or add a follow-up point, please feel free to do so. Okay, so I will assume that you are listening to me and nobody has any question or follow-up. It would be interesting for us to mention that you can check our paper that is published on our website. If you look for searching for a signal, you would be able to read the full report that we tried to describe briefly in this session. You will also be able to find it in English and in Arabic. A follow-up version of this paper that takes into consideration all the feedback that we got is also going to be on the website very soon. And we added, I think, the link in the chat so you can check it. Thank you. Okay.
So Najah, just let me say something. I think at the end of this session, because I'm not sure there are no questions, which is understandable. This has been a huge download for a lot of people. But yeah, thank you so much again for having me and for organizing this session. And looking forward for anyone who reads the report and benefit from it. Again, this has been a big task, as you might know, Najah. It took a lot of time. But it was again very exciting to see the complexity of the political landscape in Lebanon and how that might affect the services that were technically should be rights, as you said, for Lebanese citizens and those who are living in Lebanon. So again, thank you, and thank you for Julia for also providing her own perspective and bringing to life what we've tried to say in the report, and being the voice of some of the focus groups we conducted last year. So yeah, just wanted to throw my last 2 cents here.
Thank you so much, Maguy. Okay, I tried to give more time in case anyone has any question you can pop up. Again, we would like to thank SMEX and thank Porticus. Again, we would like also for this project and for all the work that is going on behind the scenes and for all the advocacy that SMEX has been working on for the telecommunication service and right to access in Lebanon, but for all the other digital right topics that we're working on. Again, also thank you, Maguy, for being part of this project and for bringing all this value during this interesting discussion. Julia, we would like also to thank you for being part of our focus group discussion, for bringing your perspective into the scene and being like the voice of domestic workers in Lebanon. Your insight have been very valuable to us, and we hope like that this paper would be landing the solid ground for more work and more advocacy toward better access to internet for everyone, and maybe hopefully seeing digital rights and right to accessing telecommunications services accessible really for everyone and not only a luxury. With that, we would like you to I'm sorry, I have a black screen. Okay, I think that's it for us. Thank you so much. And we hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. See you too.